The smell hit me first. Cheap perfume mixed with whiskey, and something else I didn't want to identify. Alicia stumbled through our front door at 3:47 a.m., still wearing that ridiculous black catsuit that had cost us $200. Her makeup was smeared, her ears were missing, and she had that guilty look that wives get when they've been doing things they shouldn't. "Greg, honey, you're still awake?" She tried to sound casual, but her voice had that fake sweetness that meant trouble. I'd heard it before, usually right before she asked for money or tried to explain away some suspicious behavior. I was sitting in our kitchen, nursing my third cup of coffee and staring at her phone. Yeah, her phone. The one she'd left behind in her rush to get to whatever party she'd claimed was just the girls getting together. The one that had been buzzing all night with messages that made my stomach turn. "Rough night, Catwoman?" I kept my voice level, but inside I was burning. 23 years of marriage, and it had come to this. Me playing detective in my own kitchen while my wife stumbled home from God knows where. She kicked off her heels and tried to smooth down her hair. Oh, you know how Susie gets at these things. We just lost track of time. Another lie. Susie Dalton, her best friend since college, had become Alicia's partner in crime over the past few months. Every girls' night seemed to involve Susie these days. "Funny thing about losing track of time," I said, holding up her phone. "Your location services have been very helpful in keeping track for you." The color drained from her face faster than water down a drain. She'd forgotten about the Find My Phone feature we'd set up after she lost her last device at the mall. Technology is a beautiful thing when you know how to use it. "Greg, I can explain." "Can you? Because according to this, you spent 4 hours at the Riverside Motel. That's a hell of a place for a girls' night, don't you think?" I stood up slowly, all 6 feet 2 inches of me. Years of managing restaurant chains had taught me how to stay calm under pressure, but this was testing every ounce of self-control I had. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in months, Alicia Foster was speechless. The woman who could talk her way out of a parking ticket was standing there like a deer in headlights. "And then there's this." I scrolled through her messages, reading aloud. "From Dominic Rivera, can't wait to see you in that costume tonight." From Susie, "Dom's already at the room, you better hurry." And my personal favorite, from you to Dominic, "Greg thinks I'm just going to a party. He has no idea what kind of party it really is." The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Outside, the October wind rattled our windows, and somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. Normal sounds from a normal night in our normal neighborhood, except nothing about this was normal anymore. "How long?" My voice was barely above a whisper now. "Greg, please, it's not what you think." "How long?" She sank into the chair across from me, suddenly looking older than her 34 years. 3 months, she whispered. 3 months. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to pay for this house, her car, her clothes, her lifestyle, she'd been playing house with Dominic Rivera. The guy was a shift supervisor at the textile factory, built like a bodybuilder, and had the kind of cocky smile that made women forget they were married. And Susie knew the whole time? Alicia nodded, tears starting to flow. Real tears or performance tears, I couldn't tell anymore. She introduced us. She said I deserved to be happy, that you were always working. That what? That I was a bad husband because I busted my ass to give you everything you wanted? The coffee mug in my hand was shaking. I set it down before I threw it. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Dominic, he made me feel young again, alive. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. I don't want to hear about how alive he made you feel. I want you to pack a bag and get out of my house. Your house? Greg, this is our home. Not anymore. You made your choice when you decided to play dress-up at a motel with your boyfriend. You want to feel alive? Go feel alive somewhere else. She stood up, and for a moment I thought she might actually leave quietly. Instead, she crossed her arms and gave me that defiant look I'd seen too many times lately. Fine. If that's how you want to play it, maybe we should just get divorced. I'm tired of pretending to be happy in this marriage anyway. The words hung in the air like smoke. She'd said it, the D word. After 23 years, 3 miscarriages, my mother's funeral, her father's heart attack, countless anniversaries and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday nights, she was ready to throw it all away for a factory worker with muscles and no sense. But instead of the devastation she probably expected, I felt something else. Something cold and calculating. Something that reminded me of my old boxing days, when I'd learned that the best time to strike was right after your opponent thought they'd landed a killing blow. You know what, Alicia? You're absolutely right. We should get divorced. I picked up her phone and started typing. But first, let's make sure everyone knows exactly why. What are you doing? She lunged for the phone, but I was faster. I'm sharing your location history from tonight with your sister Emily, and your parents, and my brother Mike, and everyone else in your contacts who might be interested to know where you've been spending your evenings. You can't do that. Watch me. I hit send on a group text that included a screenshot of her location at the Riverside Motel, along with a few choice messages from her conversation with Dominic. There. Now everyone knows what kind of party you've been attending. Her phone immediately started buzzing with responses. Emily, her older sister, was the first to reply. Alicia, what the hell is this? Then her mother. Call me right now, young lady. Then my brother. Greg, I'm so sorry, man. You bastard, she whispered, staring at the flood of messages. No, sweetheart. I'm the husband you just threw away for a one-night stand that lasted 3 months. There's a difference. I stood up and walked toward the stairs. I'm going to bed. When I wake up, I want you gone. We'll let the lawyers figure out the rest. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear her crying behind me. Real tears this time, I was pretty sure. But I didn't look back. 23 years of marriage had just ended in my kitchen, and somehow I felt more alive than I had in months. The hunt was about to begin. I didn't sleep. How could I? Instead, I sat in my basement office, what Alicia had always mockingly called my man cave, and planned my next moves. The room was lined with my old boxing trophies and restaurant management certificates, reminders of who I used to be before I became just Alicia's husband. By 6 a.m., I had 3 cups of coffee in me and a strategy that would have made my old drill sergeant proud. First rule of combat: know your enemy. Second rule: know their weaknesses. Third rule: exploit those weaknesses without mercy. My phone rang. Richard Kellerman, my best friend since high school and the only guy I trusted to help me through this mess. Dude, I just saw your text. Are you okay? Richard's voice was thick with sleep, but I could hear the concern. I'm better than okay, Rick. I'm focused. Can you meet me at Murphy's Diner in an hour? Of course. You want me to bring Nikki? Yeah, bring your wife. I'm going to need someone with a clear head to keep me from doing anything stupid. An hour later, I was sitting across from Richard and Nikki Kellerman in a corner booth at Murphy's, the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the waitresses had been there since the Carter administration. I laid out the whole story, showing them the messages, the location data, everything. Jesus, Greg, Richard said, shaking his head. I always thought Alicia was a little self-centered, but this is sociopathic behavior, Nikki finished. She was a social worker, dealt with broken families every day, and didn't mince words. The planning, the lies, involving Susie as an accomplice, this wasn't a moment of weakness, this was calculated. That's what I figured. So now I need to calculate my response. I pulled out a notebook where I'd been sketching out ideas. I'm not going to just roll over and let her take half of everything I've worked for while she rides off into the sunset with her boyfriend. What are you thinking? Richard leaned forward. He'd been my sparring partner back in our boxing days, and I could see that old competitive fire in his eyes. I'm thinking Dominic Rivera and Susie Dalton are about to learn what happens when you mess with someone who knows how to fight back. Over the next 2 hours, we put together a plan. Richard would use his connections at the phone company to get more detailed records of Alicia's communications. Nikki would reach out to some of her contacts in the legal community to find out about Dominic's background, and I would start gathering intelligence the old-fashioned way. My first stop was Mrs. Callahan, our 70-year-old neighbor, who knew everything that happened within a 3-block radius. She was watering her garden when I walked over, and her eyes lit up like Christmas morning when she saw me approaching. "Oh, Greg, dear. I was so sorry to see Alicia leave with her suitcases this morning. I hope everything's all right?" "Actually, Mrs. Callahan, I was hoping you might be able to help me understand some things. You see everything from your kitchen window. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Any visitors when I wasn't home?" Her face took on that conspiratorial expression that neighborhood gossips live for. "Well, since you mention it, there has been a rather muscular young man coming by on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Drives a red Jeep Wrangler. Always parks 2 houses down like he doesn't want to be seen. Tuesdays and Thursdays. My longest days at the restaurant. Of course. And Susie Dalton's been coming by more often, too. Sometimes she brings that man with her. They all go inside together and—" She lowered her voice. "Well, I don't want to spread gossip, but there's been quite a bit of laughing and carrying on, music playing loud enough that I can hear it through my bedroom wall." They'd been using my house. My bed. While I was working to pay the mortgage, they were having their little parties in my home. "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. You've been very helpful. Oh, Greg, I do hope you'll be all right. You're such a good man, and Alicia, well, some people just don't appreciate what they have." My next stop was Nate Morrison's boxing gym. Nate had been my trainer 20 years ago, and we'd stayed friends even after I hung up my gloves to focus on building a career. He was in his 60s now, but still built like a brick wall and twice as tough. "Greg, good to see you, man. You look like hell, though. What's going on?" I told him the story while we worked out, taking my frustration out on the heavy bag. Each punch felt like I was hitting Dominic Rivera's smug face. "So what do you need from me?" Nate asked when I finished. "Information. Dominic Rivera works out somewhere. Guy like that doesn't get those muscles sitting on his couch. I need to know where, when, and who he talks to." Nate grinned. "Leave that to me. The fitness community in this town is smaller than you think. Give me 24 hours. That evening, Richard called with his first report. "Okay, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that Dominic Rivera is an idiot who doesn't understand technology. The bad news is that your wife has been a lot busier than you thought." "How busy?" "Try 3 different guys over the past 6 months. Dominic's just the latest." The room started spinning. 3 guys, 6 months. While I'd been planning our 25th anniversary trip to Europe, she'd been running a revolving door of boyfriends through our house. Who else? A personal trainer named Marcus Webb. That was February through April. Then some guy named Tony Castellano from May until July. Now Dominic since August. And Susie knew about all of them? From the message timestamps, it looks like she was the coordinator, setting up meetings, providing alibis, even giving your wife advice on how to keep you from getting suspicious. I sat down hard in my desk chair. This wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy. And Susie Dalton, the woman I'd welcomed into my home for 15 years, the woman I'd helped move apartments, the woman whose shoulder I'd cried on when Alicia and I lost our 3rd pregnancy, had been orchestrating my humiliation. "There's more," Richard continued. "Nikki found out some interesting things about Dominic. Guy's got a record. Assault charges from a bar fight 2 years ago, suspended sentence. And he's married." "Married?" "Yeah, to a woman named Carmen. They've been separated for 8 months, but no divorce filed yet. Apparently, she kicked him out for cheating." "Perfect. So Dominic Rivera was a serial cheater with anger management issues, and my wife had chosen him over me. Rick, I need you to do me a favor. Can you find out where Dominic's staying now? If he's separated, he's probably renting somewhere cheap. Already on it. Give me until tomorrow. After I hung up, I sat in my basement office and stared at the wall of photos, pictures of Alicia and me from better times. Our wedding day, vacations, anniversaries, Christmas mornings. All of it had been a lie, or at least the last 6 months had been. But as I looked at those photos, I realized something. I wasn't the same man who'd taken those pictures. That man had been naive, trusting, willing to believe the best about people. The man sitting in this chair right now was someone different, someone harder, someone who understood that sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. I opened my laptop and started typing. If Alicia wanted to play games, I was about to show her what a real game looked like. The Autumn Harvest Festival was the biggest event of the year in our town. Every October, the whole community gathered in Riverside Park for food trucks, craft booths, and live music. It was the kind of wholesome, small-town event where everyone showed up, which made it perfect for what I had planned. Nate had come through with intelligence on Dominic. The guy worked out at CrossFit Revolution every morning at 6 a.m., drove his red Jeep like he was auditioning for Fast and Furious, and was currently living in a studio apartment above Mallory's Tavern downtown. More importantly, Nate had confirmed that Dominic would be at the festival. He was dating someone new already, and they'd been seen around town together. That someone new was my wife. Richard met me at the park entrance, carrying a small backpack that contained the tools for my revenge. You sure about this, Greg? Once we do this, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment she decided to cheat on me in my own house, I replied. Besides, I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm just sharing some information with the community. The festival was in full swing when we arrived. Kids were running around with candy apples, teenagers were trying to impress each other at the ring toss games, and adults were sampling craft beer and pretending to be interested in handmade pottery. It was Norman Rockwell meets modern America, and it was about to become the setting for my wife's public humiliation. I spotted them by the bandstand, Alicia, Dominic, and Susie, acting like they didn't have a care in the world. Alicia was wearing a new outfit I didn't recognize, something low-cut and attention-grabbing that she definitely hadn't bought with my credit card. Dominic had his arm around her waist, and Susie was laughing at something he'd said, playing the role of supportive best friend to perfection. There they are, I said to Richard. You ready? Let's do this. The festival's sound system was run by volunteers, and Richard's cousin Danny was working the booth. For $50 and a promise to keep his mouth shut, Danny was willing to let us borrow the microphone for a few minutes. I waited until the band took their break, then walked up to the microphone. The feedback squeal got everyone's attention, and suddenly I had 300 people looking at me. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry to interrupt the festivities, but I have an announcement to make. My voice carried across the park, and I could see people stopping their conversations to listen. My name is Greg Foster, and I've been a member of this community for over 20 years. Some of you know me from the restaurants I manage. Some of you know me from my volunteer work with the youth boxing program. I could see Alicia's face in the crowd now. She'd gone pale, and Dominic was looking around like he was planning an escape route. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank some special people in my life. First, I want to thank my wife Alicia for teaching me that 23 years of marriage means absolutely nothing when someone with bigger muscles comes along. A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the kind of announcement people expected at a family festival. I also want to thank Dominic Rivera for showing me what kind of man my wife really prefers. Dominic, you're quite the catch. A factory worker with assault charges who's still married to someone else. Really, Alicia couldn't have done better. Now people were actively turning to look for Alicia and Dominic in the crowd. I could see them trying to push through the people toward the exit, but they were trapped by the crowd's curiosity. And finally, I want to give a special thanks to Susie Dalton, my wife's best friend, who spent months helping coordinate their affair. Susie, your dedication to helping destroy my marriage has been truly impressive. The way you set up alibis, provided meeting places, and even helped my wife juggle multiple boyfriends over the past 6 months, that takes real commitment. The crowd was buzzing now. People were pulling out their phones, recording everything. In a town this size, news traveled fast. And this was the kind of news that would be the talk of coffee shops and dinner tables for months. Now, I know some of you might be wondering if I have any proof of these accusations. Well, funny thing about modern technology, it keeps records of everything. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system via Bluetooth. For example, here's a voice message my wife left for Dominic just yesterday. Alicia's voice came through the speakers, clear as a bell. "Hey baby, Greg's working late again tonight. Why don't you come over around 8? I'll make it worth your while. And don't worry about Susie. She's bringing wine and staying for the show." The crowd erupted. People were gasping, laughing, pointing. Someone in the back yelled, "Holy shit!" and a few people applauded. This was better than any reality TV show. And here's a text message from Susie to my wife sent last week. "Dom says he's getting tired of sneaking around. Maybe it's time to dump Greg and make this official. You could do worse than a guy who knows how to satisfy a woman." I could see Alicia crying now, and Dominic was red-faced with anger. They'd managed to push closer to the edge of the crowd, but people were actively blocking their path now, wanting to see how this drama played out. But my personal favorite is this group chat between all three of them, discussing their plans for last Tuesday afternoon. I scrolled to the right message thread. Alicia writes, "Greg's at the restaurant until 6. Come over at 2 and we'll have the whole afternoon." Dominic replies, "I'll bring the handcuffs." And Susie adds, "I'll bring the camera. We should document this for posterity." That last one was a lie. I'd made it up. But the crowd didn't know that. The reaction was immediate and explosive. People were shouting, laughing, and a few women were calling Alicia names that would have made a sailor blush. "So, in conclusion," I said into the microphone, "I just wanted to publicly thank these 3 wonderful people for showing me that sometimes the trash takes itself out. Alicia, Dominic, Susie, you're all welcome to each other. And to everyone else here today, enjoy the festival. The beer tent is serving 2-for-1 specials all afternoon." I handed the microphone back to Danny and walked away from the bandstand. Behind me, I could hear the crowd still buzzing with excitement and disbelief. People were approaching Alicia, Dominic, and Susie, asking questions, taking pictures, generally making their lives miserable. Richard caught up with me near the parking lot. "Dude, that was brutal. Remind me never to get on your bad side." "That wasn't brutal," I replied, watching as Alicia finally broke free from the crowd and ran toward the parking lot, tears streaming down her face. That was just the opening act. As we walked to my car, I could see Dominic arguing with some guy who'd apparently recognized him from my description. Susie was standing alone by the bandstand, looking like she'd been hit by a truck. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Alicia. "How could you do this to me? I'm humiliated." I typed back, "You humiliated yourself. I just provided the venue." She responded immediately, "This isn't over, Greg. You'll pay for this." I smiled as I read her threat. She still didn't understand what she was dealing with. This wasn't the old Greg, the one who would have suffered in silence and tried to work things out through counseling. This was the new Greg, the one who'd learned that sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to become a bigger bully. "Actually, Alicia," I typed back, "this is just getting started. You wanted excitement in your life? Congratulations. You're about to get more excitement than you can handle." I hit send and put my phone away. The festival continued around us, but the mood had definitely shifted. People were talking in small groups, sharing gossip, speculating about what would happen next. They wouldn't have to wait long to find out. Monday morning came with a phone call that made my coffee taste even better. It was Carmen Rivera, Dominic's estranged wife, and she was furious. "Is this Greg Foster, the guy from the festival yesterday?" "That's me. What can I do for you, Carmen?" You can tell me everything you know about my husband and your wife, because I just got about 50 phone calls from people who were there. I want details, and I want them now. I spent an hour on the phone with Carmen, sharing everything I'd discovered about Dominic and Alicia's relationship. She was a tough woman, worked as a nurse at the county hospital, had put up with Dominic's cheating for years before finally kicking him out. But hearing about his latest conquest had pushed her over the edge. I've been trying to be civilized about our separation, she told me, but if he wants to play games, I can play games too. I know where all his bodies are buried, if you know what I mean. What kind of bodies? The kind that involve unreported income from his side business selling steroids to gym rats. The kind that involve him using my nursing credentials to get prescription painkillers for his friends. The kind that could land him in federal prison if the right people found out about it. This was getting better by the minute. Carmen, I think we might be able to help each other out. I was hoping you'd say that. We arranged to meet that afternoon at Murphy's Diner. Carmen turned out to be a small woman with steel in her spine and a folder full of evidence that could destroy Dominic's life. Bank records showing unexplained cash deposits, photos of him dealing drugs at the gym, even recordings of phone conversations where he bragged about his illegal activities. Why didn't you turn him in before? I asked. Because I'm not vindictive. I just wanted him out of my life. But after yesterday, after seeing him parade around with your wife like some kind of conquering hero, she shook her head. Some people only learn the hard way. What do you need from me? I need you to help me gather more evidence. And I need you to help me make sure this information gets to the right people at exactly the right time. We spent the next 2 hours planning our strategy. Carmen would use her connections at the hospital to verify Dominic's prescription drug activities. I would use my restaurant management experience to track his financial irregularities, and together, we would build a case that would send him away for a long time. But first, I had a more immediate problem to deal with. Susie Dalton had been calling me all morning, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Greg, please call me back. I need to explain my side of this. You don't understand what really happened. Greg, I know you're angry, but destroying my reputation isn't going to fix your marriage. We need to talk. Greg, if you don't call me back, I'm going to have to take legal action. What you did yesterday was slander, and I have witnesses. That last message made me laugh. Susie threatening legal action was like a mouse threatening a cat, but it also told me she was getting desperate, which meant she was about to make mistakes. I called her back that afternoon. Greg, thank God you called. We need to meet and discuss this situation like adults. Sure, Susie. Let's meet at your house tonight, 8 o'clock. Actually, I'd prefer somewhere public. Maybe Murphy's Diner? No, I think your house would be better, more private for the conversation we need to have. There was a long pause. Greg, you're scaring me. I don't think... 8 o'clock, Susie. Don't keep me waiting. I hung up before she could argue. Susie's house was perfect for what I had planned. Isolated, private, and full of evidence that she'd been helping coordinate Alicia's affairs for months. At exactly 8 p.m., I knocked on Susie's front door. She answered wearing a bathrobe and a nervous expression. Greg, I'm so glad you came. Please, come in. Can I get you some coffee? This isn't a social visit, Susie. We both know why I'm here. Her living room was exactly what I expected. Expensive furniture bought with her ex-husband's alimony money, photos of her and Alicia from various girls' trips, and a wine collection that probably cost more than most people's cars. Greg, I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. When Alicia first started talking about being unhappy in your marriage, I just wanted to be a supportive friend. By helping her cheat on me with 3 different men? It wasn't like that. She was depressed, feeling trapped, and I thought maybe if she could feel attractive again. So you decided to play matchmaker with my wife and a bunch of losers. Susie sat down heavily on her couch. I made mistakes, okay? I should have encouraged her to talk to you instead of looking elsewhere. But Greg, you have to understand. She felt like you didn't see her anymore. You were always working, always stressed about money, and she needed someone to make her feel special. And you thought Dominic Rivera was the answer? A married drug dealer with assault charges? I didn't know about the drugs, and his separation from Carmen seemed legitimate. What about Marcus Webb, the personal trainer she was screwing in February? Did his situation seem legitimate too? Susie's face went white. How did you... She told me you didn't know about Marcus. I know about all of them, Susie. Marcus, Tony, Dominic, the whole parade of men you helped march through my house while I was working to pay for my wife's lifestyle. Greg, please, I'm sorry. I know I made terrible decisions, but I was just trying to help a friend. Can't we find a way to move past this? I stood up and walked over to her mantelpiece, where she had photos of herself and Alicia from their various adventures. Vegas, Miami, New York, trips that Alicia had claimed were girls' weekends, but which I now suspected had involved men. Here's the thing, Susie. You didn't just help my wife cheat on me. You helped her lie to me, humiliate me, and steal from me. Because every dollar I spent on her clothes, her car, her credit card bills, that was money she was using to look good for other men. I never thought about it that way. Of course you didn't. You were too busy playing puppet master with other people's lives. I turned to face her. But now it's time for you to face some consequences. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. I mean that everyone in your contact list is about to receive a very interesting email. Photos, text messages, voice recordings. Everything I've collected over the past few days that shows your role in this whole mess. You can't do that. My family, my job, my reputation. Should have thought about that before you decided to help destroy my marriage. I hit send on the email. There, done. Susie lunged for my phone, but I was faster. Greg, please, you have to stop this. I'll do anything. It's too late for that. You made your choice when you chose Alicia's happiness over my marriage. Now you get to live with the consequences. I walked toward the door, leaving Susie crying on her couch. As I reached for the handle, my phone rang. It was Alicia. Greg, what the hell did you do to Susie? She just called me sobbing about some email. I shared some information with her friends and family, the same way you shared your body with half the men in this town. You're being cruel and vindictive. This isn't like you. You're right. The old me would have suffered in silence and tried to work things out, but the old me was married to someone who respected him. The new me is dealing with a cheating whore and her accomplice. Don't you dare call me that. Why not? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. I got into my car and started the engine. By the way, Alicia, you might want to have a conversation with Dominic about his side business. Carmen Rivera has some very interesting stories to tell about your boyfriend's illegal activities. What are you talking about? Ask him about the steroids. Ask him about the prescription drugs. Ask him about the federal charges he's about to be facing. I hung up before she could respond. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Satisfaction. For the first time since this whole mess started, I was the one in control. I was the one making the moves, calling the shots, deciding what happened next, and I was just getting started. The next morning brought news that made my revenge even sweeter. Nate called me at 7 a.m. with an update that had me grinning into my coffee. Greg, you're not going to believe this. Dominic Rivera got arrested last night. Arrested? For what? Possession with intent to distribute. Apparently, someone tipped off the DEA about his steroid operation, and they raided his apartment above Mallory's Tavern. Found enough illegal drugs to stock a pharmacy. Carmen had moved faster than I expected. How much trouble is he in? Federal charges, man. He's looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted. And get this, they also found evidence that he's been using stolen prescription pads to get painkillers. That's another federal charge. I couldn't have planned it better myself. What about Alicia? Was she there when they arrested him? That's the best part. She was there, but they let her go after questioning. Apparently, she claimed she had no knowledge of his illegal activities and cooperated fully with the investigation. Of course she did. Alicia had always been good at saving her own skin, even if it meant throwing other people under the bus. But this time, her self-preservation instincts were going to work in my favor. My phone rang as soon as I hung up with Nate. It was Alicia, and she sounded desperate. "Greg, I need your help. Dominic's been arrested and I don't know what to do." "What do you want me to do about it? He's your boyfriend, not mine." "Please, I'm scared. The DEA agents were asking me questions about drug use, about whether I knew about his business activities. What if they think I was involved?" "Were you involved?" "Of course not. I don't do drugs, you know that. But they found some of my things in his apartment, and I'm afraid they might think—" "What kind of things?" "Clothes, jewelry, some photos." "Greg, what if they arrest me too?" This was perfect. Alicia was panicking, which meant she was vulnerable, and vulnerable people make mistakes. "Where are you now?" "I'm at Susie's house, but Greg, she's acting really strange. She keeps crying and talking about how her life is ruined. What did you do to her?" "I told her family and friends the truth about her role in your affair. Apparently, they weren't very understanding. Her mother called this morning and said she never wanted to see Susie again. Her sister hung up on her. Even her ex-husband called to tell her what a terrible person she is." "Actions have consequences, Alicia. Susie's learning that the hard way." "And what about me? What consequences am I going to face?" "That depends on what you're willing to do to make this right." There was a long pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I might be willing to help you with your legal problems, but it's going to cost you." "How much money do you want?" "I don't want your money, Alicia. I want something much more valuable." "What?" "I want you to admit publicly that you destroyed our marriage. I want you to admit that you cheated on me with multiple men, that Susie helped you do it, and that you lied to me for months. I want a full confession, recorded, that I can use in our divorce proceedings." "Greg, I can't do that. It would ruin my reputation, my career. Your reputation is already ruined. Half the town saw you at the festival, and the other half has heard about it by now. Your career in HR is over. No company is going to hire someone who can't even manage her own personal relationships. The only question now is whether you're going to cooperate with me or face the DEA investigation alone." Another long pause. "What guarantee do I have that you'll actually help me?" "You don't have any guarantees, but you don't have any other options either." "I need time to think about this." "You have until tonight. Meet me at Murphy's Diner at 8 o'clock with your decision. And Alicia, if you decide not to cooperate, I'll be calling the DEA tomorrow morning with some very interesting information about your relationship with Dominic and your knowledge of his activities." "You're bluffing. I never knew about the drugs." "Maybe not. But I have photos of you at his apartment, text messages where you talk about his business meetings, and voice recordings where you discuss his extra income. A federal prosecutor might find that very interesting." I hung up before she could respond. The truth was, I didn't have any evidence that Alicia knew about Dominic's drug dealing, but she didn't know that, and fear was a powerful motivator. That afternoon, I met with Carmen Rivera again to coordinate our final moves. She'd provided the DEA with all the evidence they needed to convict Dominic, and she was feeling satisfied with her revenge. "He called me from jail this morning," she told me, begging me to post his bail, promising he'd changed, asking me to forgive him one more time. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that forgiveness is earned, not given, and that he'd have plenty of time in federal prison to think about how to earn it." "Any word on when the trial will be?" "His lawyer is talking about a plea deal. Apparently the evidence is so overwhelming that fighting the charges would be pointless. He's looking at a minimum of 3 years, probably 5. Perfect. By the time Dominic got out of prison, this whole mess would be ancient history. That evening, I arrived at Murphy's Diner early and chose a corner booth where I could see the entire restaurant. Alicia arrived exactly at 8 o'clock, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Her usual perfect makeup was gone, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had the desperate look of someone who'd run out of options. "Greg, thank you for meeting me. Have you made your decision?" She sat down across from me and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote it all down. Everything you asked for." I read through her confession. It was detailed, accurate, and completely damning. She admitted to cheating with 3 different men, described Susie's role as coordinator and enabler, and acknowledged that she'd lied to me repeatedly for months. "This is good, but I need it recorded, not written." "I figured you'd say that." She pulled out her phone. "I'll record it right now, if you promise to help me with the DEA situation." "I promise to do what I can, but understand, Alicia, after tonight we're done. No more contact except through lawyers." She nodded and started recording. For the next 10 minutes, she spoke into her phone, confessing to everything she'd done, naming names, providing dates and details. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. When she finished, she sent me a copy of the recording. "There, are you satisfied?" "Almost." I pulled out my own phone and showed her the screen. "I've been recording this entire conversation too, just to make sure there's no confusion later about what was said." Her face went pale. "You recorded me without my consent?" "This is a one-party consent state, Alicia. I'm allowed to record conversations I'm part of, and this conversation is going to be very useful in our divorce proceedings." "You bastard, you never intended to help me, did you?" "Actually, I am going to help you. I'm going to call the DEA tomorrow and tell them that my estranged wife had no knowledge of Dominic Rivera's illegal activities. I'll tell them that she was as surprised as anyone to learn about his drug dealing and that she's cooperating fully with their investigation." "You will?" "I will. Because it's the truth, and because destroying you legally won't give me the satisfaction that destroying you socially already has." She started crying then, real tears, not the fake ones she'd used to manipulate me for years. "Greg, I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. I just wanted to feel alive again, and you chose to feel alive by betraying the man who loved you for 23 years. Save your apologies, Alicia. They're about 6 months too late." I stood up to leave, but she grabbed my arm. "What happens now? Where do I go from here?" "That's not my problem anymore. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them. Dominic's going to prison, Susie's family has disowned her, and you're about to be divorced and unemployed. Congratulations, you got the excitement you wanted." As I walked toward the door, she called after me. "Greg, wait. What about us? Isn't there any chance we could work things out, go to counseling, start over?" I turned back to look at her one last time. "Alicia, you didn't just cheat on me. You humiliated me, lied to me, and used my money to finance your affairs. You brought other men into our home, into our bed, while I was working to support you. And when I confronted you about it, you threatened to divorce me like it was some kind of weapon. I was angry, I didn't mean. You meant every word of it. And you know what? You were right. We should get divorced. In fact, it's the best idea you've had in years." I walked out of Murphy's Diner and into the cool October night, leaving my wife crying alone in a corner booth. 23 years of marriage had officially ended, not with counseling or mediation or attempts at reconciliation, but with a recorded confession and a promise of mutual destruction. The parking lot was mostly empty now, just a few scattered vehicles under the amber streetlights. I stood by my car for a moment, breathing in the crisp autumn air, feeling the weight of 2 decades finally lifting from my shoulders. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "How'd it go?" I typed back. "It's done. She confessed everything on tape. I told her I'd help with the DEA. You're a better man than I would be in your position. Maybe, or maybe I just realized that revenge isn't as satisfying as I thought it would be." I didn't add the rest. that watching Alicia break down, seeing her reduced to begging in that grimy diner booth, hadn't given me the catharsis I'd expected. Instead, I just felt empty. Not sad, not angry, just done. As I drove home, I realized that I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The anger was gone, the hurt was fading, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I was looking forward to tomorrow. The house was dark when I arrived. Our house, though it would be just my house soon enough. I'd already decided to keep it in the divorce settlement. Let Alicia start fresh somewhere else. This place held too many memories for her anyway, most of them contaminated now by what she'd done. Inside, I poured myself a scotch and sat in my leather chair, the one Alicia had always hated because it didn't match her designer aesthetic. I'd bought it anyway, one small rebellion in a marriage where I'd spent 23 years accommodating her preferences. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Walker, this is Agent Martinez with the DEA. I understand you met with your wife tonight. My blood ran cold. How did you know that? We've had Mrs. Walker under surveillance since Dominic Rivera's arrest. The diner has cameras, Mr. Walker. We saw everything. I see. I took a long drink of scotch. Then you know she wasn't involved in Rivera's drug operation. Actually, that's what I'm calling about. The conversation you recorded, we'd like a copy of that. It could be very helpful in our case against Rivera and his associates. I told my wife I would help clear her name with the DEA. And you can still do that. The recording proves she had no knowledge of the drug dealing, which is exactly what you promised to tell us. Agent Martinez paused. But it also proves she was having an affair with Rivera, which establishes their relationship and helps us build our case against him. I thought about it. Alicia had already lost everything that mattered to her. Her reputation, her friends, her marriage. Helping the DEA wouldn't make things worse for her legally, but it would ensure Dominic faced maximum consequences for his crimes. I'll send you the file, I said, on one condition. What's that? My wife's name stays out of the press as much as possible. She made terrible choices, but she doesn't deserve to be publicly associated with a drug trafficking case. We can agree to that. Rivera is the target here, not his affair partners. After I hung up, I emailed the recording to Agent Martinez, then deleted it from my phone. Evidence delivered, promise kept, chapter closed. The hunt was over. The prey had been caught, trapped, and defeated. Now it was time to enjoy the victory. Except victory felt nothing like I'd imagined. I'd spent months planning this confrontation, months gathering evidence and orchestrating Alicia's social destruction. I'd pictured this moment, her begging, me triumphant, 1,000 times. But sitting alone in my dark house, drinking expensive scotch in a chair my wife hated, I realized that winning hadn't actually won me anything. Alicia was broken, yes, humiliated, certainly, but I was still alone, still dealing with the wreckage of 23 years, still trying to figure out who I was without her. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my daughter, Melissa, calling from college. Dad, I just got off the phone with Mom. She's a mess. What happened? I'd been dreading this conversation. Melissa was 21, old enough to understand adult complications, but young enough to still want her parents together. We had a talk about the divorce, about why it's happening and why there's no going back. She said you were cruel to her, that you recorded her without permission and threatened to destroy her life. Did she tell you about the affairs? About Dominic Rivera? About the other men she brought to our house while I was at work? Silence on the other end. Then, she said it was complicated, that you two had grown apart and she made some mistakes. Melissa, your mother had multiple affairs over several years. She used our money to take other men on trips. She lied to me, to you, to everyone we know. And when I found out and confronted her, she threatened to divorce me like it was some kind of punishment. I kept my voice steady, factual. I'm not the villain here, sweetheart. I'm just done being the victim. More silence. Then I heard her crying softly. I just wanted us to be a normal family. I wanted to come home for Thanksgiving and have everyone be okay. I know, baby. I'm sorry. But sometimes families break, and it's not anyone's fault except the people who did the breaking. Will you still come to my graduation in May? Of course. I wouldn't miss it for anything. Even if Mom's there? Even if Mom's there. This is about you, not us. We can be civil for one day. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about family and loyalty and the price of pride. Alicia had wanted excitement, had craved the thrill of forbidden romance. She'd gotten it, along with everything that came after, the exposure, the shame, the loss. But I'd wanted something too. I'd wanted revenge, wanted to see her suffer the way she'd made me suffer, and I'd gotten that as well. The question was whether either of us had gotten anything worth having. My lawyer called the next morning. Greg, I heard about your meeting with Alicia. How much of that conversation was recorded? All of it. Why? Because her lawyer is claiming emotional distress and entrapment. They're saying you lured her to that diner under false pretenses to humiliate her. I told her I wanted to talk about the divorce. That's exactly what we did. Yes, but you didn't tell her you were recording. In this state, that's legal, but it's going to make you look vindictive to the judge. It might affect the settlement negotiations. I don't care about the money anymore, Richard. I just want this done. Understood. But Greg, maybe ease up a little. You've made your point. Continuing to twist the knife isn't going to make you feel better. It's just going to make you look petty. After I hung up, I realized Richard was right. The satisfaction I'd felt driving away from Murphy's diner had already faded, replaced by a hollowness that felt uncomfortably like regret. Not regret for exposing Alicia's affairs. She'd earned that. But regret for how much of myself I'd lost in the process of destroying her. For how consumed I'd become by anger and revenge. How willing I'd been to sacrifice my own peace of mind for the temporary satisfaction of watching her suffer. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to Richard. Tell Alicia's lawyer we're willing to negotiate a fair settlement. No more games, no more leverage. Let's just end this like adults. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that. Might never be ready. But it was something close to acceptance. Acceptance that Alicia had made her choices and I'd made mine, and now we both had to live with the consequences. The hunt was over. The prey had been defeated, and I had won absolutely nothing worth keeping. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. The recorded confession had made the proceedings remarkably simple. Alicia couldn't contest anything when she'd already admitted to everything on tape. Your wife's attorney tried to argue for a 50-50 split of assets, my lawyer, Patricia Chen, explained as I initialed each page. But given the evidence of her adultery and the fact that she used marital funds to support her extramarital relationships, the judge awarded you 70% of everything. What about the house? It's yours. She gets to keep her car and her personal belongings, but the house, the retirement accounts, and most of the investments stay with you. I signed the last page with a flourish. What about alimony? Given the circumstances, the judge denied her request for spousal support. She'll need to find a job and support herself. Good luck with that, I thought. Word of Alicia's affairs had spread through our professional community faster than a virus. HR executives who cheat on their husbands don't get hired by companies that value integrity and family values. There is one more thing, Patricia said, pulling out another folder. Your wife's attorney asked me to give you this. It was a letter from Alicia, handwritten on expensive stationery that I'd probably paid for. Greg, I know you'll never forgive me for what I did, and I don't blame you. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was selfish and stupid and thought I deserved more excitement than a stable marriage could provide. Dominic is going to prison for 4 years. Susie moved back to her hometown in Ohio because she couldn't stand the shame of facing people here. And I'm moving to Florida to live with my aunt until I can figure out how to rebuild my life. I wanted you to know that I understand why you did what you did. I hurt you in the worst possible way, and you made sure I faced consequences for my actions. I can't say I didn't deserve it. I hope someday you'll find someone who appreciates what a good man you are. You deserved better than me. Alicia. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. It was probably the most honest thing she'd written in years, but it was also too little, too late. That evening, I met Richard and Nikki at the Rusty Anchor, our local bar, to celebrate the end of my marriage. The place was packed with the usual crowd of blue-collar workers, off-duty cops, and middle-aged divorced guys drowning their sorrows in beer and whiskey. "So how does it feel to be a free man?" Richard asked, raising his glass. "It feels like justice," I replied. "Expensive, messy, emotionally exhausting justice, but justice nonetheless." "Any regrets about how you handled things?" Nikki asked. She'd been the voice of reason throughout this whole mess, trying to keep me from doing anything too destructive. "None whatsoever. Alicia chose to cheat on me, Susie chose to help her do it, and Dominic chose to seduce a married woman. They all made their choices, and now they're all living with the consequences." "What about you? What's next for Greg Foster?" I looked around the bar at the faces of people I'd known for years, neighbors, co-workers, friends who'd supported me through the worst period of my life. "I'm thinking about staying right here. This town has been good to me, and I've got a business to run and a life to rebuild." "Any thoughts about dating again?" "Maybe eventually, but right now I'm enjoying being single. No one to lie to me, no one to cheat on me, no one to spend my money on affairs while I'm working to support them." We drank until last call, sharing stories and laughing about the absurdity of life. As the night wound down, I realized that I was genuinely happy for the first time in months. The anger that had consumed me was gone, replaced by a sense of satisfaction and closure. Around midnight, as I was getting ready to leave, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw a photo that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of my house, taken from across the street. Someone had spray-painted "cheater" across my front door in red letters. The message that came with the photo read, "This is just the beginning. You destroyed my life. Now I'm going to destroy yours. D." Dominic. Somehow he'd gotten access to a phone from prison and was threatening me. I showed the message to Richard and Nikki. "Looks like this isn't over after all." "What are you going to do?" Nikki asked. I looked at the photo again, studying the angle and the lighting. "I'm going to finish what I started." The next morning, I called Carmen Rivera and told her about Dominic's threat. She was furious. "That idiot doesn't know when to quit. He's facing federal charges, his wife has divorced him, and now he's threatening witnesses. He's going to add years to his sentence. Can you help me deal with this?" "Leave it to me. I still have friends at the prison where he's being held. This kind of behavior violates the terms of his bail reduction hearing. He'll be lucky if he sees daylight before 2030. While Carmen handled the legal aspects of Dominic's threats, I took care of the immediate problem. I called the police and reported the vandalism, providing them with copies of the threatening messages. Then I called a cleaning service to remove the graffiti from my door. By noon, my house looked normal again, but the message was clear. Dominic Rivera wasn't going to accept defeat gracefully. That afternoon, I received another text from the same unknown number. "Cleaning up the mess won't save you. I know where you work, where you eat, where you sleep. Watch your back." This time, I didn't call Carmen or the police. Instead, I drove to the county jail where Dominic was being held and requested a meeting with him. It took some paperwork and a few hours of waiting, But eventually I was sitting across from my wife's ex-boyfriend in a sterile visitation room. He looked terrible. Prison orange didn't suit him, and the cocky confidence he'd displayed at the festival was gone, replaced by the desperate anger of a man who'd lost everything. "You son of a bitch," he said as soon as he saw me. "You destroyed my life." "No, Dominic. You destroyed your own life when you decided to deal drugs and seduce married women. I just made sure you face consequences for your actions. Carmen never would have turned me in if you hadn't put her up to it. Carmen turned you in because you're a criminal who deserved to be in prison. The fact that you were also screwing my wife just made it more satisfying." He leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists. "This isn't over, Foster. I've got friends on the outside, people who owe me favors. You think some spray paint on your door is bad? Wait until you see what else I can do." I smiled at him, the same cold smile I'd given Alicia at Murphy's diner. "Dominic, let me explain something to you. I'm not the same man I was 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I was a trusting husband who believed in working things out through communication and compromise. But that man is gone. So what? You think you're some kind of tough guy now? I think I'm a man who's learned that sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to become a bigger bully. And right now, you're in federal prison facing drug charges, while I'm free and clear with a clean record and connections throughout this community. What's your point?" "My point is that if anything happens to me, my house, my car, or anyone I care about, I'm going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison. I've got recordings of these phone calls, copies of your threatening messages, and testimony from a dozen witnesses about your violent tendencies." I leaned back in my chair, completely relaxed. "But more than that, I've got something you'll never have again: respect. People in this town see me as the victim who fought back against the people who wronged him. They see you as a drug-dealing loser who couldn't keep his hands off other men's wives. You can't prove I sent those messages. I don't have to prove it. I just have to suggest it, and everyone will believe it. Because that's the kind of person you are, Dominic. The kind who makes threats from prison, who deals drugs, who seduces married women. The kind of person who destroys everything he touches." I stood up to leave. "Enjoy your 4 years in federal prison. When you get out, I suggest you move to another state and start over somewhere else. Because if you ever come back to this town, if you ever contact me or anyone I know, I'll make sure your parole gets revoked and you go right back to prison. You think you're so smart. I think I'm smarter than a drug dealer who got caught by his own wife. And I think I'm definitely smarter than someone who threatens people while he's sitting in a jail cell." I walked out of the visitation room and never looked back. 3 days later, Carmen called to tell me that Dominic had been transferred to a maximum security facility after prison officials discovered he'd been using a contraband cell phone to make threatening calls. "He won't be eligible for early release now," she said. "The judge added 2 years to his sentence for the threats and the contraband charges. 6 years. Dominic Rivera would be in federal prison for 6 years, which meant he'd be 48 years old when he got out. Middle-aged, with a felony record and no prospects for rebuilding his life. Perfect." 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting in my basement office, looking through the photo albums that Alicia had left behind. Pictures of our wedding, our anniversaries, vacations we'd taken when we were happy, or at least when I thought we were happy. The doorbell rang, interrupting my trip down memory lane. I opened the door to find Mrs. Callahan standing on my porch with a casserole dish and a concerned expression. "Greg, dear, I brought you some lasagna. I thought you might be getting tired of eating alone." "That's very thoughtful of you, Mrs. Callahan. Please come in." We sat in my kitchen, and she filled me in on all the neighborhood gossip I'd missed while dealing with my divorce. The Hendersons were getting their roof replaced, the Johnsons had bought a new car, and the house 3 doors down had finally sold after being on the market for 8 months. "And I wanted you to know," she said as she was getting ready to leave, that everyone in the neighborhood thinks you handled this whole situation with remarkable dignity. Thank you. That means a lot. Alicia was a fool to give up a man like you, but sometimes people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. After she left, I heated up some of her lasagna and ate dinner alone in my kitchen. The house was quiet, no television in the background, no phone conversations, no arguments about money or schedules or whose turn it was to take out the trash. Just peace. As I was cleaning up the dishes, I thought about Alicia's letter and her hope that I'd find someone who appreciated what a good man I was. Maybe someday I would. But for now, I was content to be alone, to rebuild my life on my own terms, to enjoy the simple pleasure of not having to worry about being betrayed by the person I trusted most. I walked out to my front porch and looked up and down the street at the houses where my neighbors live their ordinary lives. Couples arguing about bills, kids playing in yards, teenagers sneaking out after curfew, elderly people tending their gardens, normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems. For 23 years, I'd thought I was living a normal life too. I'd thought I had a normal marriage with normal problems that could be solved through normal means. But I'd been wrong about that, just like I'd been wrong about so many other things. The woman I'd loved had been living a double life, using my money to finance affairs with multiple men while I worked to support her lifestyle. Her best friend had been helping coordinate the betrayals, providing alibis and encouragement, and even meeting places for the affairs. And when I'd discovered the truth, they'd both tried to make me feel like I was the one with the problem. But I'd learned something important through this whole experience. Sometimes good people have to do bad things to protect themselves. Sometimes the only way to deal with someone who won't play by the rules is to stop playing by the rules yourself. I'd destroyed 3 lives in the process of saving my own. Alicia was unemployed and living with relatives in another state. Susie had been disowned by her family and forced to move away in shame. And Dominic was spending the next 6 years in federal prison. Some people might call that cruel or vindictive, but I called it justice. I raised an imaginary glass to the empty street and whispered the words that had become my motto: "Party's over, Catwoman, and this time you don't land on your feet." Then I went inside, locked the door behind me, and settled into my favorite chair to enjoy the rest of my evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and maybe even new relationships. But tonight, I was content to be exactly where I was, free, vindicated, and finally at peace. The hunt was over. The prey had been caught, and the hunter was ready to enjoy the spoils of victory.